Welcome again to everyone to the Insurance Perspectives podcast. On today's show, we have Jason Hansen of the Financial Insurance Group, or FIG. In 2004, Jason bought a very small insurance agency in a town of 800 people in Idaho with no insurance background. He continued acquiring agencies, acquiring 3 more small agencies within the first 2 years, and then in 2011 started the process of really retooling the organization towards growth. And then in 2016 brought in Nathan Walker, VP and CFO, to finish the process and help grow the organization as well. Nathan is actually who I first encountered Financial Insurance Group through some conversations around integration partners and the like, and that quickly led me to meeting Jason myself. As of today, FIG has completed more than 20 mergers and acquisitions. It feels like every time I check in, you guys are wrapping up a new purchase of a book of business, a new incorporation of a new agency. Outside of the insurance world, Jason enjoys the opportunity to coach basketball and volleyball and other sports, and he likes to give back to others in his community whenever he can. It's very hard to tell through the video screen, but Jason is a very tall individual. I bring this up because it'll probably factor into conversations later. I am grateful that he has given us some time today because he is president of the Financial Insurance Group and is a huge organization at this point, an ever-growing organization that is impressive and something that I always look to as an example of how agencies can grow in this space. There has to be a lot of mental strain in that process. And so I'm super excited to dive into our questions that we have for Jason today. And thank you, Jason, for joining us and taking part in this conversation.
I appreciate it. Some caveats. We are not a huge organization. I would say we're middle, but
Sure.
we're not a huge. But it's good to be here and always good to meet with you, King.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I interact with so many 1 to 3 user agencies that I'm like, 20 locations. It's one of those things where I appreciate that perspective. That gives me a great opportunity to segue into my first set of questions because I want to give our listeners some perspective on Financial Insurance Group and yourself as an agency owner and president of that organization. How hands-on are you in the agency day to day?
There's been some evolution. When I started out, I was extremely hands-on, working all the time, 60 to 80 hours a week, trying to figure out how to make it go. I didn't have a mentor and didn't really have much to go from. It was just learn as you grow and baptism by fire. Part of our model shift was a greater focus on looking for self-motivated or a different type of individual to work in the organization. Now one of our cores is teach people correct principles and let them govern themselves. So what that has done for us is taken a lot of the hands-on approach off because not all people, most people. Well, I shouldn't even say most. The people that we like to work with are the ones that don't need their hand to be held through a process. And I say that from a corporation perspective because we have our corporate structure, and then within our corporate structure, we have agency partners. So our agency partners, they will hire staff, and they'll be a little bit more hands-on in that realm as they're working with a downline staff. But in general, we have a role within our organization, and we all try to fulfill that role. And I really, one of the greatest learning experiences for me was to get out of the way of people who are better at things than I am. And sometimes, we want to micromanage to death because we always think we can do it better. And the reality is that we can only do certain things and we can't do everything better. And if we want to try to do everything, we're always going to limit our potential and our growth.
Mm,
So it
mm-hmm.
gives it, within our organization, it's the chance and the opportunity to give other people an opportunity to grow, put them in situations, but then it takes a big burden off of somebody else's plate. So it's,
Sure.
comes down to more shared responsibilities. So,
Yeah. I love that. And so now in your role as president of the organization, um, how many people do you interact with directly on like a day to day?
so I would say it's fairly minimal. Um, One of my challenges that I've had to work through is to, from being an isolationist.
Mm,
It's really easy for me to go hide. So, for example, I worked from home for the first 17 years in the industry, and so I was trying to grow this company without much interaction.
mm,
So even today, because I've been used to it, I go in my office and my door's shut. Um, Not because I don't want to be disturbed, just because I've been cultured to that, by my
yeah.
own volition. My door is always open. People can always come in, people can always call, but I like to work in
Hmm.
quiet. So my interaction is typically contact made. So if people contact me within our organization, or if I have to go, work on some specific things. So I would say, it's probably in the 5 to 10 people range on a daily
Sure.
basis. Um, and it's usually different because we've got a lot of different agency partners.
Yeah. That makes
Yeah.
total sense. And I appreciate that insight. Um, I think it'll help folks listening to this understand um, and kind of contextualize themselves within your experience of is that dissimilar to how they operate? It's very similar to how I operate. I interact with a lot of people every day, but I've been working from home for the last 5 years, and I'm kind of the same way. My door is closed right now. I also kind of need an environment where there's not a lot of distractions. Has there been a pivotal moment in your life that inspired you to start to focus on your own mental health?
Uh, yeah. So really some of the challenge, I mean, obviously it's a lifetime of challenges, people deal with and work through and grow through. But the last major challenge that we had is really what changed our organization, changed my mindset, but also pushed me further into that isolationist path. It was 2010. My wife was accused of child abuse,
Oh,
and um, it was wrongly accused of child abuse. But in
mm-hmm.
the process, health and welfare took our children away,
Oh,
and we, fought and did everything that we could to stop that whole process. Well, when you go through a challenge like that, obviously our children are back, everything is
mm-hmm.
good, but when you go through a process like that and you go through a court system, um, regardless of how supportive everybody was, and we had tremendous support, it changes who you are and it changes your desire to be, in a public side. My wife does fantastic with it, but I struggled with it,
Yeah.
and I just pushed myself further and further away. Um, and in doing so, changed our company model to what it is today. And really, that portion was a blessing in disguise, um, as our model has really enabled us to grow in a way that I don't think we would have been able to otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But going through that process, I really isolated myself. We lived on a farm out in the middle of nowhere for a little while, and um, there was a point where I just had this really strong impression that it was time to change things and get back into society.
Mm-hmm.
And and so we did. We sold the farm, moved our family back into essentially the city, and for the first time in my insurance career, I worked in an office, and I've been
Mm.
working in the same office, and I've actually thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed being around people again, but it took its toll. Um,
Yeah.
you know, as you can imagine, and probably other people imagine as they've gone through their own experiences. But um, yeah, going through those challenges doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily make you an expert on challenges, but it does help you to become more empathetic towards other people's challenges.
Sure.
And I think that learning experience in and of itself has helped me to become a better uh, president of our company,
Yeah.
because I can empathize with people in ways that I
Hmm.
probably wouldn't have been able to before, having not experienced a major challenge in my life.
Yeah. And I appreciate your candidness in talking about that. I think it's meaningful for folks to be open in these conversations. Because I think, as you just mentioned, like everybody has these experiences. Everybody goes through a life that throws things at them that they're maybe not prepared for or not expecting. And when we isolate, I think a lot of times we start to think that like only I am experiencing this. Everyone
Yeah.
else is fine. Everyone else has a much more straightforward path that they're walking, and they're not encountering these types of challenges. And being able to be open about them, I think it allows us to form these connections. Um, I'm curious to dig on this a little bit more. Was there was there a catalyst where you're just like, I have to shake things up. We have to get back out there. Like, or did the switch in your brain just flip one day where you're just like, this is I got to change this up.
Well, I mean, it's a great question. I think most of the time people understand they're going through a challenge. I think
Mm,
there's rare exceptions when people don't understand they're going through a challenge. But the challenge, you have to gauge how it's impacting your personal life and how it's impacting your work life.
mm-hmm,
And there definitely was a point where um, we were status quo.
mm,
We weren't making progress, and um, and you want to justify it in your mind that it's not because of this. It's just the industry right now, or
mm-hmm,
I just can't find the right people.
mm-hmm,
And sometimes it takes some real internal um, perspective to be able to say, all right, is it me, and what do I need to do?
yeah,
What do I need to change? Um, I definitely at that same time, I definitely had that aha moment where it was
mm-hmm,
like, it's time to get back to to civilization.
yeah,
Um, maybe against my will a little bit, but I knew it was the right thing. And,
sure,
we have seen by far the most growth um, since I have come back into,
mm-hmm,
civilization.
sure,
In working in office, getting a better connection of individuals, the agency itself. Um, so yeah,
yeah,
we're just at that point today.
mm-hmm,
I think because of all of those things, that
yeah,
the whole journey is part of what makes you, not a moment.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I I've been working from home since 2020. HawkSoft went remote like March. Let's say like middle of March in 2020. And I definitely got to a point myself where I live in a big city, or not. I live in a big city for the Pacific Northwest, and I would not leave my apartment for days. And so I had to start tracking. It was like, did you leave the apartment today? And I had to like keep track of that. And so it is one of those things where you kind of have to lean into being uncomfortable with it and be like, yes, I went outside. Like, no, it wasn't just the mailbox. Like, I went on a walk or I went to go see friends or something like that. Because yeah, I think people. I mean, you had your family around you, but people don't really thrive isolated. And so I
Yeah.
think there is some benefits to getting back out there, getting connected, um, finding what works for you, and the balance of like work from home. I love working from home, but I do need to get out.
A favorite quote that I think has helped, and I've reiterated this, but there is no growth in the comfort zone, and there is no comfort in the growth zone,
Hmm.
and that's part of if we want to grow, we've got to challenge ourselves, and it could be a minimal challenge of
Hmm.
getting outside your your apartment or your house, like you've had to go through, and it changes you.
Hmm.
You'd push yourself to different levels of things that you can work through it. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean you're awesome at it, but you know you can get to that next level and then work on the next thing.
I love that quote. I completely agree. I think it's one of those things like the only true constant in life is change. How did you develop a skill set for helping your team navigate their own mental health or encouraging them to get outside of their comfort zone, get into that growth mindset? How did you start implementing that within the organization itself?
So I think there's sometimes people are born with natural abilities, and sometimes it has to do with your family dynamic and how you grow up, and sometimes it has to do with the things that you participate in organizationally wise. I played a lot of sports in general through high school, and then I played basketball in college. I think another key piece for me was I also served a 2-year mission for my church, which if you want to get uncomfortable, go serve a 2-year mission, because it's a challenge, and people in general you know, can be very unkind. But you
Hmm.
work through it, and during through that process, you get put into different leadership positions, and helping people through their own challenges. Um, and just because you go through those experiences doesn't mean that you're not going to experience some of your own.
Hmm.
But having been put in leadership positions and having led, being uh, captains of sports teams, or leadership positions in faith organizations, or in different roles within your work environment. Living through those situations is different than living through challenge, your own mental challenges, your own
Hmm.
struggles. And when you have the experience of leading and teaching and guiding, a lot of that a lot of that teaching and guiding is from things that you've read or things that you've helped people through, not necessarily what you've lived through.
Hmm.
And so, having gone through all of that up front, and then going through my own, mental challenges, makes you a better leader and more equipped to,
Hmm.
to work through some of those things, because now you've got both sides. It's kind of
Hmm.
like, we're in the insurance industry. It's kind of like, being an agent, but never
Hmm.
experiencing a claim.
Hmm.
It's hard
Sure.
to help somebody through a process, the claims process, if you've never been through it yourself.
Yeah.
And so, having gone through claims yourself, now all of a sudden you're more equipped to help people through the challenging processes. And
Hmm.
it's really not much different.
Whenever someone overhears me call into a support line, they're always just like, "How are you so patient with those people?" I'm like, "Well, I started at HawkSoft in product support, and I've taken thousands of phone calls." And I completely agree with you. I think that taking our lived experience and applying it when we try to help others or when we're guiding others, um, it builds that bond, and you don't put yourself on like this pedestal above and say like, "Oh, in your situation,
Right.
do this." You're saying like, "I've been in your situation. This is what I did. How can I help you?" Those types of things. Um, that's very true. I think it would be very difficult for an agent to feel or to come off as sincere if they've never been in an accident or had a pipe burst on their house or something like that, for sure. You mentioned participation in your church, and I think it's fair to describe you as a person of faith. Do you mind if I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
So, what role does your faith play in how you maintain your own well-being, and how does it inspire you to support others?
So everybody's going to have a different answer because they might have different faiths or, again, their lived
Hmm.
experience. For me personally, I view things, and this might sound a little weird, but I view things as more of an eternal perspective
Hmm.
than a here and now perspective.
Hmm.
Um, and what I mean by an eternal perspective is I try to live in a way that my Savior would be happy with me, you know, and and what that means, after I die. Not, I want to live my legacy and leave a legacy. You know, my experience in this life is going to be what it is, but
Hmm.
what's the next one going to look like? And
Hmm.
am I spiritually and emotionally prepared, for that next existence,
Sure.
whatever that may look like. And so because of that, I want to do my best to treat people the very best I possibly can. I
Hmm.
want them to know that I genuinely love them.
Hmm.
That I care for people. I want them to be happy and be successful. And and I think going through that process, sometimes you realize that people don't want the same for you.
Hmm.
And sometimes you have to be able to compartmentalize people or
Hmm.
individuals within your life
Hmm.
to uh, to keep a positive around you.
Sure.
And so we try our best to keep positive environments. Like like you've said, is in your experience at HawkSoft, how are you so patient with people? Well, I think that's a really, really important factor when you're dealing with hard decisions or hard
Hmm.
situations.
Hmm.
People are looking for calm in the storm,
Hmm.
and and sometimes that's why people gravitate towards those type of people
Hmm.
because they're looking, they're not looking for chaos. They're looking
Yeah.
for help and support. And so having peace in your own life, having
Hmm.
structure in your own life, and having a moral foundation,
Hmm.
that you don't just talk it, but you live it.
Yeah.
It helps when people are looking for why are they so put together? Why do they? I need to know, what's
Hmm.
happening there. And so
Yeah.
it makes it more rewarding for me to know that I can live my life with who I am,
Hmm.
um, in a in a positive light, in a positive manner. Um, just because
Yeah.
it potentially could be a help to other people if that's what
Hmm.
they're searching for what I have.
Sure. And I think that oftentimes I encounter in business a lack of that type of long term thinking. And because I look at the wall behind you, and I know you have a large family, and you care greatly about your children. And to me, when you talk about this kind of long term thinking, it's that how do you make sure the world is good for them? How do you make sure that even beyond that, things are good for them? And I think that often in businesses and organizations, people are not having that perspective. And I think that drives a lot of the issues that we see in the types of pressure that get put on employees, the pressure that gets put on people in their lives is like, how do we have this short-term gratification versus how do we build this long-term path that generations are going to benefit from versus just like, oh, I'm going to benefit from this right now. As I mentioned in the introduction, you've acquired quite a few books of businesses and agencies over the years that I've known you. How do you ensure that your remote or spread out teams are functioning well?
I think this is a really important question because it all comes down to structure.
Mm-hmm.
For us, I'll go back to what we mentioned, or what I mentioned in the beginning, is our model and the people that we seek after. So one of the things that Nathan and I work on and try to be more of are um, developers of entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for people who want to be successful, want to have something of their own, um, for us, it's more important to have a smaller piece of a bigger pie than a bigger piece of a smaller pie. Not everybody
Mm,
feels that way, and that's okay. You can be super successful, bigger piece of a smaller pie. Um, but in doing so, it has allowed us, and even as an organization. So, for example, one of the things that we encourage and we push that time is more important than money.
mm,
And we want people to be happy in their experience with us. Also, obviously taken care of. We want people to be as successful as they possibly can. And one of the things that I'm I'm proud of, it sounds weird, but we have multiple people in our organization that make more money than I do,
mm,
because they've earned it, they deserve it,
yeah.
and I'm not here to take it from them. So with that responsibility, I mean, with that income comes responsibility. So
Mm-hmm.
as, for example, as we acquire an agency, we will either turn that agency over to one of our agency partners, or we will bring a new agency partner in.
Mm,
We provide the back end support for our partners. We help them be successful. We've built an organization where they can work with each other and help depend on one another for knowledge and input. So it takes a huge burden off of everybody. They're not doing it by themselves.
yeah.
Um, and so for us, it's more of a complete organization that way, where it's a carousel of support in different
Mm-hmm.
ways. Um, Even from the perspective of finding like virtual assistants, we'll help them find virtual assistants. Um, so, they have less burden where they can be some more
Yeah.
successful. We have less burden with where we can be more successful, and they implement that same strategy down within their agency that they're working at with their staff,
Mm-hmm.
where, burdens are being taken off of different places, or being shared in different places.
Yeah.
Um, where I think the health of our company and the people that work in it is really positive. Our partners are fantastic. We love them.
Something that has stood out to me over the course of our conversation so far is your attention to the burden that you carry as president of the organization, the burden that is carried by the folks that are your agency partners, the staff in those agencies, um, and it really sounds like caring about the stress and burden placed on the people within your sphere of influence allows you to kind of help effectively, and not, it does not sound like to me that you put an emphasis on maximizing the profitability of a resource. It sounds like to me that you care about ensuring the well-being of the person, uh, and making sure that they don't carry too much, that they're not overburdened.
Yeah, I may be a failed leader in that regards. I definitely don't focus on maximizing my own pockets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I was in a different organization, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably be terminated. But it's I was, before you even mentioned that, I was thinking through conversations that we've had with some of our partners, where they feel like, "Oh, I'm just overburdened," and I'm like, well, what does your income look like? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think it's pretty solid. Why don't you bring somebody else in? Well, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if I want to do that. Well, it's hard to, it's hard to hear complaints when you're not willing to give something up. If you
Sure.
can bring another person in and offload a bunch of that challenge, and all of a sudden get some of your time back, is that really more valuable than money? I mean, when do you plan to retire? Is anything going to change? Are you going to retire sooner because you've made more money quicker? Probably
Mm-hmm.
not. You're going to continue to work. So why not make your working experience easier, more positive? Take a little bit less money, and everybody's happier. You can
Yeah.
have more quality time with your family through that process. But so many people want to, all right, how much revenue can we squeeze out of each individual? I get it. You're trying to run a business, but again, is your focus on revenue, or is your focus on time or quality,
Yeah.
or where's the balance? And I think that's what I would encourage people to do. Find your balance. Listen
Yeah.
to the needs of your other people. They need a balance in life too. it stinks to hire somebody and have them leave because they can't handle what you've thrown on their plate. And
Hmm.
going through 10 people before you finally get that one magic person that says, oh yeah, I can do all of this. That's a lot of cost and time lost
Yeah.
because you've gone through that scenario where it could be different if you just thought a little differently about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I generally don't say this on a recorded record, but one of my go-to explanations about how HawkSoft works is we're bad at business. We don't prioritize profit. And I think that's kind of why maybe we get along really well, our organizations and yourself and Paul Hawkins. Because I think that we share that philosophy where it's, to us, time is more important than money. And I think there's a lot to be gained in the welfare of people by taking that position. I can respect the alternative. I understand why that approach appeals to people, but I think in terms of that long-term thinking that we touched on earlier, caring more about time is a little bit more sustainable. This gives me an opening to my last kind of substantive question, because I think that we can talk a lot about supporting people and focusing on their well-being, but that doesn't mean we remove accountability from the conversation. And so I'd like to know your perspective on where do you draw the line in supporting a team member that is struggling? If they're having maybe mental health struggles or personal struggles, where is that line that has to be drawn between support and enabling?
Yeah, I think when it becomes a detriment to the people around them and the company,
Mm-hmm.
it's obvious that you have to move on. So, for example, if you've got someone that's habitually not showing up for work, or habitually not able to take care of their responsibilities, and those things keep getting put on other people. Um, it's the hardest. It's probably, I mean, I shouldn't say it for everybody, but for me, it's one of the hardest things to do in the industry, is to terminate people.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have a responsibility to everybody else in the organization. You can empathize and you can do, what you can within your power. Um, but the reality is that you're not going to solve people's problems.
Mm-hmm.
People have to solve their problems from the ground up. And that may mean the first step is to go seek some professional help.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have their own admissions of this is where I'm at, and change. But you as an agency owner or a staff member, you are not going to solve their problems for them. You may prolong some of their challenges,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean the challenge is going to go away.
Yeah.
So it's a hard position to be in, because you look like you're a terrible person for cutting somebody while they're down, when
Mm-hmm.
the reality is you had nothing to do with that. Um, you're not going to fix that,
Yeah.
and you still have to run an organization, and you still have to be accountable to the other people within the organization. And if you don't, then you have created a new environment
Mm-hmm.
for others. This might come off as odd, but most people are going to take what you give them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't create a structure or an expectation, they're going to take and they're going to take and they're going to take. It's just kind of the natural person of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so within that structure, people tend to thrive within some structure.
Mm-hmm.
It's when the structure is taken away is when we have no idea what we're going to get. And
Yeah.
so if you allow an individual to go unstructured with no accountability, then you're educating the rest of your staff members to do the same.
Yeah.
And you're also weakening your own self by not taking a responsible approach.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that many people can sympathize with the idea of being part of a team where there's maybe just one bad actor that is sinking the ship. And it's just like, well, if they were gone, we'd be a little bit better. And it does suck to have that kind of reconciliation between, yes, this person is struggling and we can see it, but giving them the opportunities to improve hasn't happened. And now their actions are impacting others in a far more negative way. And so it might feel unkind, but I think, as you said, you have to think about the whole. You have to think about everyone else that's watching it happen.
Yeah, I'll tell you a real quick story.
Please.
I had a teammate when I was in college, and we were the number 2 ranked team in the country. We were undefeated at that time. The teammate who was the previous freshman of the year in America in the JUCO ranks, he was stealing from our teammates, and I was one that was not part of the regular team stuff because I had different perspective then. But anyway, he was stealing from our teammates, and within a short amount of time, 4 of our teammates quit, and he got kicked off the team. And we went from the number 2 ranked team in the country down to a 500 team, just because of the issues of one individual that that one bad apple aspect. Those bad choices changed everything, and that can happen within your company. One person might push other people out because you're not taking care of the responsibility of eliminating the people that are causing the problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. As a closing thought, I just wanted to know if you had any recommendations or like resources that you found helpful, podcasts, books, things that you felt kind of gave you a resource or a strength to draw on as you face challenges.
So, my canned answer would be the scriptures. For me, that's definitely a source of hope and peace and enlightenment. I read probably 8 to 10 hours a day, but I generally don't read books because I'm pretty ADHD or ADD. I wouldn't say I'm hyper, but I'm definitely ADD. And so I have a hard time reading things long term. So I don't read too many books. And I couldn't make a recommendation in regards to what to read or what to listen to outside of that, just because that's not how I operate.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I think that a lot of people do find comfort in the good book, as it is called. So I appreciate that. And I sincerely appreciate your willingness to join us in this conversation. I think that folks might, when I met you, Paul Hawkins told me, he was like, just keep your eyes out for the tallest guy in the room. And not like 2 seconds later did you walk into the hotel that we were having a hug event at. And I was like, oh, that must be him. And I think that something that's meaningful about your willingness to participate in these conversations is, I feel like, people, when they judge books by their cover, they're going to maybe look your direction and be like, it's a tall former athlete. He probably has it all together. Doesn't really need to think about these challenges, or has probably had an easy life. And so I really appreciate you being willing to say, I have faced my adversity. I have learned from it. Here are lessons that I can share. Because I think it helps people tune in and say like, oh, if he's willing to have this conversation, I should be as well. So I really thank you and appreciate your time and contribution to this conversation.
I appreciate Kenny. That's, we go from one challenge to the next. You just hope that you can shoulder the next one as well as you shouldered the last one.
Absolutely. Thank you for watching today's episode. Click the video description below to learn more about our guests and to view the latest podcast episode as well as other content from HawkSoft. We appreciate you watching and hope you join us next time on the Insurance Perspectives podcast. Thank you.